Hello, and thank you for joining us for SLiTHER number 40. Um, I can't believe we've had 40 SLiTHERs. I'm so excited for this opportunity to host SLiTHER number 40. I'm Matt Cranswick at Oregon State University, and today we're going to be talking about how to discuss non-traditional non-traditional activities towards tenure and promotion with our host Joanne Stewart at Hope College. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Or Joanne said that she's happy to field questions or be interrupted to field questions. I just ask that if you don't have any questions, keep yourself on mute so we don't pick up cats, dogs, crying undergraduates. I used that one last week, so I couldn't think of a new one. But feel free. This is a discussion. A presentation and a discussion. So with that, Joanne, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Matt. Decided to title this How to Document Ionic Viper and Other Non-Traditional Scholarly Work for Tenure and Promotion. So one of the topics that has come up at our workshops and sometimes come up on the Discord as well is when people are putting together their portfolios for tenure and promotion, they want to know, if they've written a learning object, how do they represent that, and so on. So that's what we're up to. I would like to start first with a question. And so if you could, for the people who are here synchronously, if you could put in the chat an Ionic Viper related activity, professional activity, or it could be non-Viper related. So something that you do in your work life that you would like to get credit for. So we'll take 2 minutes to get a few examples here. All right, so Matt, as more of those come in, you can bring them to my attention. And so we got 3 things that shared in the chat. One is the NanoChat Newbies series, which is a series of NanoChats about teaching a class, teaching inorganic for the first time, which was shared with us. It's a great series. Team SLiTHER activities, which Matt is very involved in, and then also writing LOs. And so those are 3 good examples of Ionic related activities that people are engaged with. And I have a couple of more ideas that I'm going to present formally as well. So what I want to start though is with a little bit of backstory here. And that is that in 1990, there was a book written and published by Ernest Boyer called Scholarship Reconsidered. And this continues to sort of shape where our discussion of scholarly activities in higher education is going. And so in this book, Boyer advocated for expanding our traditional definitions of what scholarship or research is. So traditionally, we all were raised, at least those of us who are chemists anyway, research was done in the lab or at a computer, and research that counted was research that made new chemical knowledge, etc. And in 1990, Boyer said, wow, that's a really narrow definition, and faculty really have a lot of responsibilities beyond that, and higher education. So this book is really about Boyer's vision of what higher education should be. It's a great read. I highly recommend it. So in the beginning of this book, Boyer describes 4 types of scholarship. So he chooses to use the word scholarship here as opposed to research. I tend to use the terms a little bit interchangeably depending on what I'm talking about. And these 4 types of scholarship discussed in this book are the scholarship of discovery, and that might be sort of the type of research that we traditionally think of as chemistry research. The scholarship of application, which is the important work of taking new discoveries and making them useful for others. And these actually have longer, broader definitions. I'm just going to give you the short version here. The scholarship of integration, can I take the things that are new and emerging in my discipline and see how they interact or integrate with new and emerging things in other disciplines, and how that could potentially be used to even address then complex real world problems. And then finally, the scholarship of teaching, or teaching in a scholarly way. And so probably many of you know that the scholarship of teaching means many, many different things. And so I'm not going to go into all of those things here, but I will point you to SLiTHER number 32, And so if you want to sort of explore what the scholarship of teaching is, Justin Pratt did a great job in SLiTHER number 32 of talking about sort of the similarities and the differences between science education research, chemistry education research, discipline-based education research, scholarship of teaching and learning, etc. And so I'm going to, in this presentation, talk about sort of scholarly teaching, if you will. But as in Justin's SLiTHER, he talks more about how this type of research can be the scholarship of discovery, it can be the scholarship of teaching, it's kind of can be both at the same time, etc. So I highly recommend that. All right, so that was lovely, and people were, some people really embraced this, others were a little suspicious of where Boyer was taking things. But over time, I think that there are many institutions that started to embrace this broader definition of what scholarship is. So that then raises the question, if this is what scholarship is, how do we evaluate it? So in, I think, 1997, Charles Glassick and Mary Huber, Jean Meyerhoff, wrote this book called Scholarship Assessed. And so it sort of starts with this Boyer broad definition of scholarly work and talks about approaches to evaluating that work for purposes of tenure and promotion and any other reason that you might want to do that. Glassick, I knew, worked for a while down at Wabash. They had like an institute for the liberal arts, study of the liberal arts down at Wabash. And Mary Huber was my Carnegie Scholar mentor a long time ago when I was in a group of Carnegie Scholars. And so this is a fun book for me to use. So I'll show you sort of what basically for all those different types of scholarship, they came up with one relatively straightforward framework. It's a little small here. So this summary of standards. And so it says, if a person does these different types of scholarly work, how do we evaluate what that is? Well, no matter which type of scholarship it is, there should be clear goals, adequate preparation, appropriate methods, significant results, some type of effective presentation, and that's oftentimes where people get hung up in that, in chemistry, effective presentation is a paper in the right journal. But depending on what type of scholarly work you're doing, that might not be most effective. And you could argue that publishing a learning object on Viper is probably a more effective way to get some teaching information out there than publishing it in a journal that people may or may not see. And then finally, the one that I think people tend to ignore the most is this reflective critique. So reflecting on the work that you have done, the scholarly work that you have done. So what I like to do is take this summary of standards and apply it to some of the types of work that are maybe difficult to put into your tenure and promotion portfolio. So let's start with learning objects. So that one came up as a possible thing. So how can we talk about learning objects and present this work? So I'll just tell you what I do. I do count learning objects as publications, but I do keep them in a separate section of my CV. So I don't put them with my journal publications. They're in their own category. They have their own table, if you will. And so the way that I discuss them when I'm explaining to reviewers what it means to be a learning object author, what I'm going to do is walk through these steps. And so how is writing a learning object scholarly? All right, so first of all, do you have clear goals? Well, I've sketched out some answers to these questions, but of course they would probably need to be fleshed out more if you're writing a statement for tenure and promotion, but this is at least a starting point. So do you have clear goals? Well, my goal is to use my specific chemistry expertise. I'm going to use that to write this learning object, which will help the broader chemistry community teach this area more effectively. So we talk in Ionic all the time about how inorganic chemistry is just so broad that none of us can have expertise in all areas. So I'm going to use my specific expertise to help other folks who may not have expertise in this area. So my goal is to improve teaching of this topic. Am I adequately prepared? Did I do my lit review? Well, in this case, for example, maybe it's an area of expertise from your graduate work. Or here, I developed expertise in this area during my last sabbatical. And again, do I have adequate preparation? Well, I've got this area of expertise and I've developed this learning object and I've successfully taught it in my class. And so I'm well prepared to write this LO. I've done all the things that I need to do. Am I using appropriate methods? There's a few different ways to interpret this. I'm going to talk about, does the learning object itself use appropriate methods for teaching the material? So here I gave an example. I've designed a scaffolded small group activity. So I would say something about evidence-based practices, and it guides students to practice their understanding of MO theory. We know that student learning is improved when students receive frequent constructive feedback. And so in this case, they would get feedback while they're working on it. Are there significant results? Here, students rated this as their second most favorite learning activity during the semester. So some kind of feedback that from having taught it. There have been 133 downloads by other chemistry instructors of this activity on Viper. So if downloads is something that you're interested in, I would say, just contact any of the leaders of the Ionic project and we'll figure out a way to get that information to you. Right now, it's all sort of tucked away in Google Analytics. And so you could, if that's information you want, you could always email me, stuart@hope.edu, if you need sort of number of downloads for your promotion package. Was the work effectively presented? Yes, I put it on Viper, which has over 1,000 registered faculty users from around the world. So this is high impact with respect to teaching materials. And last but not least, reflective critique. There's a couple different ways I think about this. In the learning object, you've written a section called implementation notes. And that can be, for me, that's part of my reflective critique, or the section where I share how my students did it, how it was evaluated, et cetera. So some of that's in the LO, sort of how did it work? How could you improve it? What have you learned, et cetera. Or even better yet, if people have used it and left comments behind on Viper, you can sort of include those in any type of reflective critique. So people made this suggestion, so I modified the learning object for the future, et cetera. Shirley, do you have a question?
Yes, I love this list. I'm digesting this list as you're presenting it. And one of the points I wanted to go back and ask about was significant results. And I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is, to me, sometimes I write an LO on something, on a literature article that I'm really not an expert in. And I myself then learn a ton from doing that. And that's actually significant, because then I'm prepared to share sort of with my students or with other members of the Ionic community, something about the process of diving in and understanding that. And I wonder if there's, I just bring that up as, is there a way to sort of say that, say that to people in there?
Yeah, and I would say, you would not have been able to, you probably would not have been able to develop that new expertise without all of your previous expertise and your PhD in chemistry. And so certainly I think it would be fine to say, I developed expertise in this area by reviewing the literature. And one of the things that made this learning object particularly effective is that I was new to this information as well. So I had the insight of the new learner. Yeah, I would pitch it that way. I think that's great.
And then my other comment is about the number of downloads, which I think is a very valid measure. But also I realize that, Viper's philosophy is to publish and then filter. And so I'm just wondering, if somebody asks for the Google Analytics data on their particular LO and that number is 5, does that make it less significant? And how to sort of discuss and couch that? Like, I probably would just elect not to put the number in.
Yeah, I would probably elect not to put the number in. And when I put in 133, I, as the LO author, am certainly not assuming that 133 people have taught this activity. So it is just sort of a measure of how much interest is there in this. And so, yeah, so, you know, as an LO author, you might want to solicit feedback from other folks if there's, because we know people aren't very good about leaving comments on the site. Or should I say, we would like to encourage more commenting. I'm trying to say that in a positive way, more commenting on the site. And so since there isn't a lot of commenting on the site, I might solicit feedback from somebody else, and sort of in terms of helping me think in a reflective way about this LO. Yeah, like for example, the ones that I've written for these award-winning kinds of things, I don't think that they're necessarily going to get a lot of broad usage. And we know people use bits and pieces of them anyway. It's the nature of how this works. And so, yeah, so I'm just sort of trying to suggest ways to kind of a framework for thinking this through. So thank you. Please ask more questions. That's great. So here's sort of how I list LOs in my CV. So in my CV, and it's sort of an old-fashioned one. In the far left column, I have the topic, so publications or grants or whatever it is. So that's what's on the far left here. Then I have a column where I write out the title of it. And the reason that these ones say Saddleberger and Notaro and Burns is because that's actually part of the title, because those were all for awardees, LOs that I wrote for awardees. Then I write what the LO type is, and then what date it was published on the Viper website. And I do include a little note that these are peer reviewed, although oftentimes in my narrative, I will explain that it is maybe an abbreviated peer review. So certainly somebody does read it, they provide feedback, they ask questions, so it is a peer review, but it's probably not at the, people are not necessarily going to, you know, bounce your LO because they don't like it kind of thing. So we do try to get them up on the website as fast as we can. So I might in the narrative explain a little bit about how the peer review process works, but they are peer reviewed. So, all right. So one thing that didn't come up, but I prepared for was, what about workshop presenters? Because we have a lot of you, and we are trying to bring in more people to present at workshops. I do count this as a scholarly activity. It gets listed in its own category on my CV again. So I have a category of LOs. I have a category about workshops I presented. And I include in this SLiTHER presentations as well. Let's see, I probably, nano chats, I might put in a different category. We can talk about that in a little bit here. I might put them in this category. I'd have to decide kind of what it is, but SLiTHERs I definitely do, because these are meant to be workshop-like, online workshops, sort of, webinars. All right, so let's sort of just walk through this one. So how is this scholarly? You know, do I have clear goals? My goal is to encoil, let's say I'm doing a summer workshop. My goal is to encoil new Ionic members and help them become published authors on Viper. And so what's nice about that is that by the end of a workshop, we have new members and they have published. So I know I'm always going to achieve that goal right there. Number two, do I have adequate preparation? I could say, well, I attended a 4-day workshop myself. And during that workshop, I published 2 learning objects. So I have the experience of having attended one of these workshops myself. And then I co-organized this workshop with 2 experienced workshop presenters. So we were well prepared to give this workshop. Number 3 were appropriate methods used. So workshop design is something maybe people don't think about. It's something I think about a lot. Workshop design was based on previous successful workshops. And also on the faculty development literature about workshop design. And that has informed all the Ionic workshops that we've done. We can say, you know, participants were actively engaged because we know that active learning in the classroom is good. Active learning in a workshop is good. And they all produced a public workshop product, meaning a learning object. I think that I'm a big believer in that workshops, faculty should have something to show for themselves at the end of the workshop, some sort of a product. And we do that in our summer workshops. So were there significant results? We do all our workshops, we do a workshop survey. So in my P&T, I would say, yes, we have a post-workshop survey indicated that 14 out of the, I'm making these numbers up, but 14 out of 15 participants rated the workshop very good or excellent. And 10 out of 15 plan to increase their engagement in the Ionic community. So looking back at what were my goals, and making sure that that links back to what those goals were. Was there effective presentation of this? So here's, is this a scholarly activity? Well, I did this workshop. So I guess you could call the making public was that there were 20 people at this workshop for whom this was public. So that could be your effective presentation, just that workshop audience. That's not what I put here, but that would be one way to answer this question. The way I put it here is I said, not only did we do this workshop, but then we shared it out with the chemistry community at large at a national ACS meeting. So a poster describing the results of this workshop was presented at the spring 2022 national ACS meeting, if that's something that you did. Reflective critique, again, there's lots of ways to think about this here. I wrote a blog post after the workshop reflecting on what I had learned as a presenter. Again, this is the piece that tends to get left off most often, but when I'm writing something for tenure and promotion, I include this reflective critique. I say something about what I learned from having done this, how I could do it better next time, how it made a difference in the world, etc. So some sort of a reflective critique there. All right, so while I've got this up here, let's think about, and maybe Shirley, you can help me with this a little bit. Let's think a little bit about the nano chats. So these are short, small group discussions about a topic. And in particular, nano chat newbies always was engaged with 2 new instructors to inorganic chemistry and a host talking about sort of what they had taught that week. And so I guess with respect to the nano chat newbies, I would see that as a body of work, right?
Right. Right. Not individual episodes, but together. Yeah.
Right. And so I would ask, so we could probably go through this. So the goals were very clear, and that was to document in real time the process of new instructors of teaching this course in order to sort of inspire other new instructors and also to inform experienced instructors on what this process looks like. Adequate preparation. You had already done nano chats before, and so you had the model existed, and you were the world's expert at it. So, say that. And then I don't think I'm going to go through the rest of these right now, but do you want to say anything else about sort of how to do this with nano chat newbies?
Yeah. So I was going to say just that the goals of having this transparent teaching moment and this reflective teaching moment that is open and sharing. And I do want to kind of make a plug, as with SLiTHER's nano chats, when they go up on the Ionic Viper YouTube channel, there's usually a posting about them and the invitation for the community to just talk about it. So it's not just the act of making it available on YouTube, but then the engagement that happens on Discord. And I would venture to say, if there's any way to document or get credit for Discord participation, maybe that's going to be later. But that sort of reminded me that that's another way that people engage in professional activities.
And actually, I didn't put that in here, but I will add it. And that is, that's where much of the reflection happens. Mm-hmm. And so definitely, if I were writing this up, I would write something about the reflective stuff that happened on the Discord. That's a great example. I don't have a lot more. So I was, how do I list workshop presentations in my CV? I make up a title. I say who all the workshop leaders were. I kind of make it look like a journal presentation. What were the dates? Where was it held? Was it in person? Was it remote, et cetera? And try to be clear about that. And I've done a lot of workshops. So this is a big part of my CV, actually. All right. And then what if you are an Ionic Viper team member? So these are the committees of the Ionic community. And so I personally tend to count this as service, although there are certainly some scholarly pieces that are in there. For example, Team SLiTHER that's putting on these webinars has a really important scholarly piece in that they surveyed all of the participants about the participants' experiences with these webinars. They have analytics from YouTube about usage and downloads, or views, I should say, of the webinars, et cetera, and have put that into a manuscript. And so that's definitely a scholarly piece there. But the sort of day-to-day management kinds of things that team members do is very much, for me, I count it as national service. So here's my pitch here. I manage the NSF IU's project for Ionic. And so I didn't really say I'm the PI because we have a bunch of co-PIs and it was just getting complicated. So I just say I manage Ionic, and I say what Ionic is and how big it is, what its mission is. What do? I plan meetings and workshops. I provide stipends and reimbursements, submit the annual NSF report, carry out research, write publications. So just kind of a laundry list of what I do as my sort of service to Ionic's, as national service to the community. It really, I believe, Ionic's big enough that it's the equivalent of service to any sort of professional organization. I do a little bit more than that. I also mentor new communities of practice, such as organickers, and help them grow, help them develop their web presence, help them obtain external support, et cetera. And so with that, just in terms of, I've mentioned what's in my CV. So the order that I kind of list is a little quirky, but it's what I do. So teaching experience, administrative experience, and then I have a big category called workshop presentations. And if I get external funding for a workshop, if I get either a grant or just somebody pays to make a workshop happen kind of thing, I figure out a way I'll put that in research support under grants. Consulting gigs that I do, honors and awards, professional societies, and then research support is my grants and things. Publications for me is a combination of traditional journal publications and some less traditional online publications, usually with a little bit of an explanation of what that publication is and whether or not it was peer reviewed. Then I have a whole chunk on Viper learning objects. And I have a list, and my big long CV, I have a list of all my research students and kind of what they're up to now as best I can do. So with that, I'd like to open this up to discussion and any questions that you might have about how to present these materials. I'm going to unshare.
Joanne, I have a question. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but I think one of the things that we have trouble with is presenting the work, which you've shown us how to do that here. The other one is the trepidation maybe of sharing the work and how that's going to be received. And I wonder if you could either address that with your personal experience or anecdotally with others you may have talked to, because I know that was always a hard part for me when I went up for tenure and promotion was, well, I don't think they're going to weigh this with any at all. Well, at all.
Yeah.
But I put a lot of time into it. So how do I strike that balance, or how does somebody strike that balance? I guess?
So that's a great question. Sort of, you can put this all on paper, but if it's just dismissed, what good does that do? And I guess a couple of things. One is that, things are better today than they were yesterday. And so that's a positive way of looking at it. For me, it's been a long journey of having that type of thing happen often. And so I guess the way I view it, I tend to think about things very strategically. And so I think, what strategy can I use to try to, not let the committee dismiss these kinds of things. And so I will often, through the years, I've had just a lot of one-on-one conversations with folks explaining things. And so, and sort of coming back and saying, coming back to the Boyer report again and saying, most institutions have embraced this now and have built it into their TMP process. We will, we as an institution we'll get there someday. We're not there yet, but I want you to know that I'm on the leading edge of this at my institution. And this is the direction we should be going in. And let me help you understand. Let me show you what University of Wisconsin does for, and so I will pick places that have changed their TMPs, guidelines and stuff, and say, this is, and so a lot of conversations with especially with deans and provosts. I can't tell you how much, and I'm always so sad when we have dean turnover, because then I have to start over again. And I would say I've had to start over on that conversation every time with a dean. I someday I might not have to, someday we may get a dean who is already, knows all of this stuff kind of thing, but that hasn't happened yet. And so, and in general, the deans are really receptive to it, but it takes them time, right? Because the first reaction is, oh, this isn't really, other places don't do this. And then you start to feed them the information and show them other places do. And it's a process. And so my answer to your question is lots of conversations with people behind the scenes, lots of strategy, lunches with people on the TMP committee, kind of thing, which of course is highly immoral and unethical and illegal, but hey, it's a small college that we're all colleagues kind of thing. And so I've worked a lot with deans and provosts and just trying to have these conversations.
Gotcha. Shirley, do you have any comments also? I know it's Joanne's presentation, but I'm going to rope Shirley in.
Well, I was going to say it's like a 3-person conversation, just like we were at the workshop and having a beer or something. I was going to actually say that one of the really rewarding parts of being part of Ionic is having other members of the community reach out and say, I am coming up for tenure and promotion, or I'm coming up for a promotion, and can someone help with a letter that talks about my involvement with the community? And the times that I've been involved with those letters have been just so rewarding, because invariably these people do amazing things, and it's up to us to tell that story in an effective way and try to do those things that Joanne has so clearly laid out. And it makes me want to go back and sort of, the next time a letter request comes in, maybe use that framework a little bit more strongly and cite it and say Boyer, right? This is Boyer's framework, and here's how that person has executed that framework. And and I just, it's so helpful to have those ideas. And I want people in the Ionic community to know that we're there to support them, right? It's not that they just happen to go to a workshop and now it's over, right? It's that we're in it for the long-term, support and relationship.
Yeah. And certainly I don't mean to claim that, everything we do is scholarly. There are things I do, I do this new thing in my class. It's really cool. And the students really liked it. That's me teaching, so I think it's okay. I don't expect everything. There are sort of workshops. I do little mini presentations here at the college, which are really service. So they need somebody to talk about at pre-college conference for an hour interactive workshop on something or whatever. I will sort of drop in, do that, pop out again. There's no survey, there's no follow-up, there's no really reflective critique. I did it as a service to the institution, so it gets listed that way. And then same thing with teaching things that are really just teaching.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the insights from both of you. So, and it's something I wish I would have known or thought more about. I think when I went up for TMP. So,
and a lot of it is also what we found through the years can also be effective. Maybe not so much with TMP, but maybe just with kind of working with administrators in general. And that is that all of this stuff that we're doing as Ionic or whatever, it all serves to improve teaching which retains students, which increases the retention of students, which has a big impact on the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And this work also is, we do a lot of professional development, faculty development work, which also contributes to the retention of faculty. And so another big bottom line thing. So often when talking with administrators, I sort of explain, look, there's a concrete outcome to this work. And that is that it contributes to the bottom line of the institution by improving retention of students and faculty. So, have I measured that? A lot of people, I have not, but a lot of people have measured those things. And so
I found myself wondering about the influence that big research schools have on this process. That scholarship at a big research school has this very traditional look to it, right? It is the currency of publications and grants, and less so the things that we're discussing now. And so it's a process of educating ourselves and educating each other, as you said, Joanne. And it would be nice, since a good chunk of people in Ionic are at institutions where teaching is the priority, to spread that word more and to say, you don't have to follow that scholarship evaluation model that the R1 university follows.
Yeah, and it's such a wide range in terms of certainly, if you're at an R1 institution, that is your culture, and you need to sort of live by those rules, and you can push the boundaries, and that's an awesome thing to do. But if you push the boundaries too hard, you're not going to stay long, And then there's folks like me who are at research active undergraduate institutions. I would say that I've pushed the boundaries, sometimes probably a little too far. It's been challenging, but it's what I've wanted to do. And then there's other folks where there really are, that institutions that truly are student-centered and teaching focused. And they are not under a lot of pressure to produce scholarly impact or whatever. And so they may take a look at this and go, how is all this stuff you're saying going to help me be a better teacher? Because that's all that counts at my institution. And I think that's wonderful. So there is, I recognize this broad range, and we're all pushing against different boundaries.
Any other questions for discussion? Or Shirley just muted herself, so I guess she's done. If there's not, I'm sure as people view this on YouTube, the conversation will continue on Discord. Not a lot of people can always make it during the times that we've selected. So I would really encourage everyone to reach out to Joanne. She's on sabbatical. She's got all the time in the world when she's not jet setting to Australia. Let's think that way.
So definitely, conversation on the Discord would be often. You can also just write me directly, Stuart@hope.edu. And I'm always happy to help.
All right. Well, thank you, Joanne. Shirley, you sure? Any more questions, comments? You're good? Okay. Well,
you.
with that, I'll stop recording. And thank you, Joanne, and our participants. Have a good day.
You too.